It's 11 o'clock. We are about to, yes, and we're live. Just fetching a video stream. This can take a few seconds. We're live. So hopefully, I'll just wait to see us.
Yes. Oh, I can see something.
Can you?
I can see you with sunglasses on. Oh, and now I can see both of us. I'm going to share it onto my...
Hopefully we can see more now. Let's have a look.
That's exciting, isn't it?
It is. Oh, yes, we're live. Here we are. So good morning, everybody. Oh, we've got some people tuning in already, which is marvellous.
That's probably me. That's me. I'm watching myself to bump my numbers up.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I watch myself. I usually watch it back when I've done a little live. I watch it back I usually watch it back going.
Yeah, that's why I don't watch it back.
I do, just so that I just Jenny says morning lovelies. I do just watch it to that's the lady I was saying about with Word Blitz, so she feels your pain.
Jenny Jigglyfruit.
Yes.
That's the best name ever. I don't know her, but I see the name Jigglyfruit going along my timeline and I think how fabulous. All the time I think that.
Yeah, she is a particularly wonderfully jiggly fruit. So, yeah, right, so we're live. So we were just discussing where Jaqueline gets her bindies from, and she's got a rather sparkly one on today, which is superb, isn't it? I do love them. So here we are live again on Sunday the 13th of September, and again I've got a returnee. I've got my lovely Jaqueline Durban come back, and she is going to talk to us today about, we think, Christianity, goddess and saints, but who knows where our journey is going to take us, because that's the whole fun of the journey, isn't it?
It is the whole fun.
So how are you this morning, Jaqueline?
I'm not too bad. I'm a bit hot at this moment for some reason.
Yeah, it's warm. It's been warm. So
it is warm.
Yeah, it was warm yesterday. So
aren't we English talking about the weather?
Yes,
before we do anything? Oh, we must discuss what the weather's like.
Yes. And do you have a nice cup of tea? We do. We have nice. You have bees, and I have little hair on mine and a mushroom.
Aren't we perfect?
Perfect. We're perfect. Oh, my daughter's watching as well. Morning, baby.
Oh, hello, Claire's daughter.
Sophie. Sophie Everest is watching, and she's my daughter. She's probably going, oh, mum. Right. So over to you, Jaqueline. So when we spoke last, you were talking about how you'd mixed and blended your views and your beliefs about goddess to finding ways of representing that and marrying that up with more traditional Christianity in your local little church, which I believe is 1,000 years old.
It is, yes.
Which is
why I love going there, really.
Because you can feel the spirituality of something.
Oh, the old stones.
Wherever you are, yeah, you can. I can't hear either of you now, so we'll try by the computer. Oh, that's Linda. It must be your friend Linda Wilshire.
Oh, is it Linda?
Can't hear either of you. Everybody else can hear us, I think, Linda. Sorry.
Oh, yes, everyone else can. That's Linda from church.
Oh, is it?
Hello, Linda from church, even though you can't hear us.
She can watch it on the replay.
She's going to her laptop, I think, so that will probably work.
And she can come back in and watch it, can't she? So, where shall we start with that, Jaqueline? How about...
You carry on.
You know what to say.
I was just going to mention about the church that it's very interesting because I'm very attached to the church because I love the stones and I love how old it is and I love thinking about the history of that and all those things, and I love how the church being there keeps the graveyard wild and sort of keeps that land, although we could get into Christianity taking the land and all that. You know, now in this reality of where we all live, a lot of land's been taken by all sorts of things, and churches are protecting pieces of land in a way. And I love the church and I'm so attached to it. But since lockdown, I think many of us in churches have become less attached to the buildings and more attached to the world, really, which is a very interesting thing. I think this has been a time of rewilding for many people. And that last Sunday, we had a service outdoors instead of indoors because there were too many of us to go inside, and everyone was saying how wonderful it was to be out in God's creation, looking at the sky and the jackdaws round us and all those things. So it was just such a lovely thing.
That is so beautiful.
It's in us all, isn't it, to be in nature? That's the thing, in one way or another.
Have you ever heard of a place called Eyam in Derbyshire? It's spelled Eyam. Now, they caught the plague. The plague travelled up there from, they think, from London on how the tailors used to do the clothes was they'd get the clothes of dead people, unpick them, take them on, and then cut them out before they had, so they'd use them as patterns. So a cart of wet clothing got taken to them, presumably from like plague victims or plague areas. And as they dried it out, the fleas and the eggs came to life. This beautiful little village called Eyam, and that is how they got the plague there. And what they did was they locked themselves down, absolutely locked themselves down, and about 3/4 of the village was wiped out, but it saved it spreading further out there.
That's
but
amazing.
They had, it is, if you look it up, they had the vicar was Montpesson, I believe. We went there a couple of years ago and it really stuck with me. They had a sort of a little valley dip sort of hill, and they spread out there for their services in the open air, because this was in whenever the plague was, so 16 something, so they didn't understand how but they did exactly that there and then. I can't think what it's called, this little natural valley gully thing that they all stood in there, spread out in their family groups, and exactly what you're describing, sort of, coming up for 400 years later. It's amazing.
Oh, we're always the same people, aren't we? That's the thing, and that's very inspiring, isn't it? And I'm sure there's communities now who are being so mindful that definitely. And Samuel Pepys wrote Samuel Pepys wrote, well, I don't know if this is real, because as ever you see quotes, don't you, and then you find out later somebody made it up, but apparently Samuel Pepys wrote something about during the Black Death, I think, people walking about on the Strand as though nothing was happening. And why are they getting so close to each other and mucking about when all this is going on? It's exactly the same as what we're saying now in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
So,
and I would say, of all the people that you could be, could be quoted, Samuel Pepys is quite prolific in his diaries, isn't he? So
he did say a lot of things.
He recorded a lot
of things. So maybe
it
is true.
Guessing it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
So back to your beautiful church and ceremony outside, which is just blissful, isn't it?
It was lovely. It was very lovely.
It's almost a very pagan thing to do, but it's also, if you look back at the first teachings of Christianity, Christ was standing by the boats with the fishermen talking, wasn't he? The Sermon on the Mount, all those things, they weren't in buildings and chapels, weren't they?
No, and when he was having difficult times, which of course he had many in that story, he didn't say, let's go to the temple and pray. He went off on his own up a mountain or out. Definitely. I don't think the thing about 40 days in the wilderness, that before Easter, we in the church, we go through Lent, which is about 40 days in the wilderness.
Yes.
And I never think that that's about penance. Often in the church, they talk about that being a punishment or a terrible testing time and all those things. And they don't talk about how the wild supports us and how that journey in the wilderness is a stripping away of the things that we don't need in order to be present to spirit. That's how I think of it. And there are things like that all through the Bible. So if you read it with those eyes, instead of the eyes that the church institution gives us, then it is an amazingly wild spiritual journey with nature, rather than all about who's a sinner and who isn't, and all those things,
Because actually, that's, if you look at it like that, and I lost my train of thought. That's because I put my phone there, because I've got a couple of comments come up that I wanted to add.
I know, I've stopped looking at Facebook because it puts me off. Oh, what are people saying? How many people are watching? I saw that.
Well, and there's lots of people saying good morning, but Jenny's just replying. I'm guessing it's about Samuel Pepys. She said he did. He also buried a cheese to save it from the Great Fire.
I would do that also. If I had a cheese, I would definitely save it before many things.
I do love some cheese.
Also, it would melt, wouldn't it? Which would be lovely. And afterwards, you'd have a fondue, wouldn't you, when you dug it up again?
Fondue was invented by Samuel Pepys in 1666. You heard it here first. But with the going into the wilderness, that's kind of a sort of what we do now to go and find ourselves, isn't it? You know, the number of people that sort of go, I just need to detach from the mainstream and go and just sit in a tent, and, you know, lots of us do it, and all this back to nature, and it's completely, totally and utterly what's been going on for millennia, isn't it?
It's just human, isn't it? It's not
Mm.
about any religion or path. It's just human. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about this before I came on, and there is a strand in Christianity now called Christian animism, which is
Okay.
becoming more and more popular. I'm sure in a tiny, you know, in my head, loads of people are doing it, but of course we all live in our own little bubbles, don't we? But it is a strand that's growing, I think. And I went to a Zoom meeting of Christian animists the other day, and it was just like going to any pagan thing, really, but with Christ woven in. And I don't think that's
Wow.
syncretism is a thing we're accused of. Like, syncretism is when people don't this is what somebody who didn't like syncretism would say, that it's people who can't concentrate on one path and don't want to commit to one path, and they just add in lots of other things as they feel to. And some people, you know, would say, oh, that's heresy, you're not concentrating on what you're doing, you're adding things in. But I think that's a great thing. I think syncretism is the way to go, really. And I was thinking about this animist kind of thread, that really at the ground of our being, we are all animists, or we will have started out as animists. You know, the first spiritual feeling will have been animism, which is about everything having a spirit or a soul, and the spirit and the soul of God, or however you would describe that, being in everything, including rocks and plants and trees and animals, everything, the air, the stars, everything. That's at the beginning, that's the ground of our being, our sort of mother ground. And then on top of that, over history, the history of humanity, we've added in other ways of thinking about spirit and woven those in. So Christian animism to me is just a thread of something that came from the beginning, and paganism is a thread that came from the beginning. And it's no, in that way, it's no different. There's no reason for us to be antagonistic towards each other than the history of the church, which is about power and privilege. But that's the institution, not the people, and not the actual spiritual belief. So yeah, I think that's the thing, to try and break down these kind of boundaries and separate the history of what people do to have power and privilege from the actual spirit that's going through it all. Because
Definitely.
before Christianity, there were pagan religions that were doing terrible things. You know, the Roman religions could be described as pagan, and they were doing terrible things.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've all done it. It's human, isn't it?
It's part of our evolvement that we leave those things behind, that they don't serve us anymore, for we've learned compassion, and, you know, and if that's something that's coming from somewhere else, you know, moral decency is a word, isn't it, that you sort of, you know, harks back to the Christianity. But before that, perhaps it was more dog eat dog, and, you know, we needed that sort of organization to sort of make people stop and think. But I love this idea of Christian animism. I've not heard of that before, and that's a
Isn't it
perfect blend.
exciting?
Isn't it exciting? And, you know, people, I would suspect the people that have got this issue with synchronicity and saying that you're not focused are the people that are more interested in the power behind it, because I think a lot of organized religions and some pagan groups, not all pagan groups, I'm not, you know, tarring everybody with the same brush. I know lots of lovely people in all walks of pagan thing, all walks of Christianity as well, lovely people. But I think there are a lot of people that the structure and the control is the thing that they like, whether they realize it or not. And
Yes.
saying you must do this is why we're all family. That Rosemary's saying, we're all family no matter what shape you manifest in. Love. So, and that's true, it is, isn't it? You know, we're all here, we're all doing our best, we're all doing our bit to understand what we are. And, you know, when you've got courses like the Alpha course that encourage you to question what's in the Bible and look at this and go, what does that mean? I know a friend on here, she's done the Alpha course, and I was chatting to somebody the other day who was going to start it because they were interested in religion and what there is out there. It doesn't have to be closed. You must do this, you must do that. It's exploration, isn't it?
Yes, I'm a bit frightened of the Alpha Course, so that's interesting. I don't know. I've heard things about how it's a bit what's the word? It can be a bit indoctrinating, but it probably depends which church you go to, doesn't it? And who's running it, like everything. It just depends on the spirit and the heart of the person who's doing it, or you're talking to, whatever the religion. I had read a quote the other day, which I remembered from ages ago. It was Carolyn Hillier in Sacred. I don't know where I'm looking at the moment because you're above me on my Zoom screen. I should be looking at the camera, shouldn't I?
It doesn't matter.
And I keep my eyes are jiggling about. No, the quote from Carolyn Hillier was, what was it? We refuse to. Oh, we don't mind covens and. Oh dear, I've forgotten it because my eyes went all squiggly. Covens, we don't mind. Hang on, I'm going to go and look because it's such a good quote that I cannot possibly.
You can't fail to, because covens can be very organised and very detrimental to people. I know people that have come out of covens scarred.
Yes, so emotionally. Do I. And people who've had a path and a connection to a god or goddess that they're so attached to and so in love with, and then they've joined a coven and been told, oh, you can't be attached to that god or goddess anymore, you've got to put them aside and follow our one. And why is that any different than what happens in churches when we're told
it's it's all power and indoctrination, isn't it?
It is.
Where's the free spirit that is you and me and many of these people watching? And there's a lot of people watching at the moment, and obviously they're all feeling the same, that their path is unique, and
it is, because we all are, aren't we? And that's the thing. The quote, I haven't found the quote, but it's something like, we don't mind covens, churches and religions as long as they're kind and free thinking, and as long as they offer maps and a cup of tea. And that's how to judge everything. And Christianity runs on cups of tea and biscuits. So, particularly the Church of England. So
everything is a cup of tea, and that's so British as well, isn't it? That everything is a cup of tea. Yeah.
As long as there's a cup of tea, you're probably all right.
It's like that. I can't remember the quote exactly, but about the best way to teach children is to teach them to learn, not teach them what to know. And that way they're forever curious and they're forever looking for you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, kind of thing. The cup of tea is very important, Linda says. Jenny's saying they can implode spectacularly. She's talking about covens, I think.
Yes.
Joe's Gregory saying
not the tea.
Yeah. I hope Jenny's tea with its Oatly milk is not exploding spectacularly, and then it was I happen to know that I think she's talking about a coven.
There's a very inspiring group in Northern Ireland called the Corrymeela community, who've existed since, I think, before the Troubles there. But when the Troubles were kind of coming, they knew what was coming, I think. So from the 60s, I believe they've been there. And they're a Christian group, and they absolutely sit with the understanding that their religion has caused a lot of the Troubles, and that they lament that and they are sorrowful about that. But their thing is, why the community exists, is to bring people from Protestantism and Catholicism together. And one of their things is we all need to sit around a table with a cup of tea. Cups of tea are magic, really, aren't they? That's the thing.
Well, it is, and it's, if you think you've got the basic alchemy of a spell there, haven't you? That you have water, milk, and this bag of black dots, and it makes a cup of tea.
And it creates a certain feeling in people, doesn't it? Like, this place must be all right because they've given me tea. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, we've got requests for coffee because I don't like tea.
No, you can have coffee also, and a biscuit or cake.
If there's cake, it's better, particularly non-exploding cake. And Joe's saying, as a vicar's daughter, she nearly drowned in tea.
When I was at the Goddess Conference in Glastonbury, it was terrible, really, because it was in the town hall. And the floor in the town hall is parquet, and they always polish it to within an inch of its life. And at the end of the conference one time, we were taking down huge banners, and they go right up to the ceiling in the town hall, so they're really high. Somebody was right up on the top of the ladder getting this banner down, and they, for some reason, the smallest woman in the world had been put at the bottom of the ladder to hold the bottom of the ladder. I don't know why. Do not ask me why that happened. Anyway, he was up there wriggling about, you know, trying to get hold of the strings to untie the banner, and the ladder slipped. The bottom of the ladder slipped. He was about 20 feet in the air. It wasn't like, it was the size of a 2-story house probably.
Gosh.
And he fell off the ladder from right at the top. And the woman was absolutely traumatized. I think he might have broken his ankle, and an ambulance, it was awful, an ambulance had to come. And the woman was shaking like a leaf. She was absolutely traumatized by what happened, because she blamed herself, of course. And there were all people around her at this goddess conference doing all this, going, oh, we're taking all the negativity out of you. We're going, doing, oh, take it out, take it, and throwing it away. And me and my friend Rosie said, what you need is a cup of tea. Come with us to the cafe and have a sit down and a cup of tea.
Absolutely.
And that was what she needed.
Yeah.
And that is also, as you say, a spell, isn't it?
Well, Joe's just said, yes, it's a ritual. And I suppose it is a ritual. It's part of, when you look at like the simplest things. I mean, we've kind of wandered off into everyday practice a little bit there, but hey ho, that's it, you know, that's fine.
We'll come back to it, won't we?
Well, if not, there's always October. But it's true, isn't it? Making that cup of tea is the thing, or coffee, as Sylvie doesn't drink tea, is first thing in the morning, is what you do. And that is it's a calming of the stirring, and you're stirring your mini cauldron of boiling liquid and going, oh God, what have I got to do today, kind of thing. And that is exactly that. It's just something that we're removed from in the magical sense of making a cup of tea, that basic alchemy, aren't we?
We discount it, don't we? We discount so much of what we do as being nothingness, because we're not present to what we're doing a lot of the time. But if we think about it, or if we stop doing it, then we would feel what it means to us, I think. If we couldn't have our cup of tea, then, or our coffee, or whatever it is, you know, it would be such an ungrounding thing, wouldn't it?
It would. And we did, there's an icebreaker for sort of training courses where they get you to list from the morning everything you've done since you open your eyes. So whether you check your phone, turn the alarm, all the things you do in the order you do it, and you pass them along, 1 or 2 people, whatever it is, 2 to the right, whatever. And you have to look at that morning crib sheet and go, you've got to do that now. This is to do with care, health and social care. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to get up and have a shave. Yeah, obviously I've got I don't need one just yet. But you know, I don't want to get straight up, brush my teeth, put my clothes on and go out the door. I want to have a cup of tea. And I wouldn't be able to function without getting up. I thought, I have to feed the cats. It was about ritual and routine. But and it was the point of it was to show you that somebody's care needed to be absolutely bespoke to them, which is but it was interesting how, although I could say, well, I wouldn't do this, it was really discombobulating looking at it thinking, I don't want to do it in that order. So
no, it's upsetting, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but you were talking about people's spirit, really, and us all having our own path. And in Celtic Christianity, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, because we were talking about geese, weren't we? The Winchester geese. In Celtic Christianity, now this is a thing that's said, whether this is genuinely old is another thing. We've got such an attachment, haven't we, to saying, oh, our spiritual past's really old. You know, if we're witches, oh, we're part of a very old lineage, and it goes back and back. I mean, who cares really? Do you know what I mean? How old something is? Because every generation, people are born who will be spiritual people, who will find spirit in whatever way they find it. And that's coming out of the earth, not out of some line of, you know, it's not really.
Some book they read, yeah.
But we want to justify ourselves, don't we? It's trying to justify ourselves. So there is a thing in Celtic Christianity that says that the Celtic Christians, who will have been, you know, 3rd and 4th and 5th century Christians in this land, didn't see spirit as a white dove, which is how spirit's often talked about in Christianity, but as a wild goose.
Oh, okay.
And with that idea, I love the idea of the wild goose, because geese they are discombobulating, aren't they, and disturbing, and they make such a racket, and they're frightening. Like, I've been chased by geese several times, and I did run away at some
Yeah,
speed, and I once stayed in a B&B in Wiltshire, I think it was, and every morning they had guard geese. It was on a farm, and
yeah.
my bedroom was downstairs, and the geese used to come and bang on my window every morning and give me terrible looks through the glass. And when I had to walk down to the road to get the bus, they used to chase me down the path. And that is what the spirit was to Celtic Christianity. And I love that idea that the wild spirit is disturbing to us. Like, I often, when we do our prayers on my live streams, I'll say, "Come, disturbing God,
Yes, you do.
shake us
Yes.
out of our furrows and our comfortable places and push us into somewhere wilder, where we can find a real connection that's not so expected or in our comfort zone." This is a glorious thing, but we're very frightened of it, really. So I love this idea of the wild goose being spirit that's following
Okay.
us and honking and trying to bite us and getting into all those things. I love
I've
it.
got visions of you running down a path with these geese coming after
I
you.
wasn't running very fast, because I don't really, but I was trying. I mean, their legs are shorter than mine, but they were still going faster than I
Yeah,
was.
that's a really interesting thought, because do you really find your own revelations and your own truths sitting there browsing through a magazine on a Sunday afternoon, or is it when you get out there and you have an experience that you try to understand and you try to take away the different layers and look at what it all is? And sometimes when it really is painful or difficult, that's when you learn most about yourself and the world around you, isn't it?
Well, when I started going to church, that was painful and difficult for me, to be honest.
Yeah,
It was terrible. I remember when I was part of the goddess temple, and when I will call myself a pagan and all these things. And I remember thinking, I hope this never leaves me. This is the most wonderful thing ever. I hope this never goes. I hope I never change, and being so attached to staying that way. And then when I moved here and suddenly I felt like, oh, I want to go to church, or I explained why that was, that I started going to Southwark Cathedral when I lost my
yeah,
goddess community. And it was kind of easy to go there because it's such a big place. Nobody even looks at you or notices you, and you can just do your own thing in many ways. But when I came here and you start going to church, that's a much smaller thing. That's a small community, and people soon get to know you and often start asking you to do things if you go to a church. And
make the tea,
and
make the tea and bring
you
the
start
cake.
drinking cups of tea with them and all that. That's a more intimate relationship, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
remember finding that very distressing, not in itself, because it was beautiful, so beautiful, but in the sense of like coming onto Facebook and my community of people who were pagans and goddess people and saying, oh, I've been to church today, was such a terrible thought to me. And my feeling of like, oh, I've lost goddess, or I've lost the earth, or where is this going? I found it very disturbing. It was absolutely awful. But I soon regrounded myself and it all started to come back in. And this is where it all weaves in together, really. But it's
Yeah.
hard, isn't it? It's hard to become a different person in front of other people, and to be brave about
Yes.
saying it. It's very
Yeah.
hard.
It's hard enough to do privately, but to then share it with other people and say, well, actually, I haven't been to that, but I have been doing this. So yeah, it is, isn't it? So
Yeah.
with that in mind, the the do you I know you talked about this on your live about the goddess in the Bible, didn't you? We that was a really interesting conversation you had that day on there. So when did you start blending them together, and how did they start to blend for you?
I think I always blended them together. That's the thing,
Yeah,
because I actually didn't let go of the goddess, because I can't when we say the creed, which is quite a long thing about what we believe, I'll swap between the words mother and father now.
yeah.
When we say God, I'll say father and then mother and then father and then mother, in
Same as
order to, yeah.
sorry, Sylvia's just some people are saying we're frozen, and other people are just carrying on and not saying we're frozen. So I'm guessing they've frozen us. Sorry, I just wanted to check we were.
Yes. It's hard to know, isn't it,
It
sometimes whether...
is, yeah. I mean, we do sort of go sometimes, don't we? But
Yes.
people afterwards are saying we haven't. So I don't know if it's a connection, but it's still recording. It's still live, so it'll be there somewhere. It might just be on the
Yeah.
replay. People. Oh, Sylvie's got us back, so we're back. We're
Oh,
back
there you
in the
go.
room.
We're back in the room.
Back in the room. But it's you saying that, I think, and I know you said before you enjoyed Sunday school, and I enjoyed Sunday school, and you tried different churches, and there was a lady, I can't remember her name. She was in one of Jenny's groups, and she'd trying going to all different sorts of churches near her. You did freeze, then came back. Yeah, we did freeze. All sorts of different churches, and she'd done some work with the Hare Krishnas, and she'd done some work with Buddhists, and so but just out of interest in what there is, but it does all. It's. I wonder why we had to split it to weave it together again.
Well, because of power and privilege, because worldly power, however we want to describe it, always wants to take the energy out of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about this morning. And Mr. Durban, my husband, likes to find new music, and occasionally he'll find some music. Like we found a sort of strain, for instance, of British rap music, which is so powerful and so alive. And when you listen to it, it's so political in the best of ways, full of like resistance to what's going on, and full of, and then when you follow the thread of it, slowly, the energy disappears. And this happens in everything. And the reason the energy disappears is because someone somewhere who's got power and privilege thinks either this is making people think about things and giving them strength to stand up against what's happening in the world, or they think, or I can make money out of this. And then they'll take it, and they'll kind of try and lure those people, and it'll all get watered down, and the energy will get taken out of it. This is the same thing that happens with religion. When Christianity got in with the Roman Empire, which had after all murdered the very person that we follow in Christianity, like literally murdered him. When Christianity decided that the Roman Empire was a really good thing to get in with, probably thinking, oh, now we can filter out, to more people, which is a mistake to think that way. Then it became, the energy went out of it, and it all became about power and privilege. So now you've got the layer of power and privilege that, for instance, the church institution is trying to keep, and also evangelical Christianity in America and all those things that do such terrible things. White evangelical Christianity, terrified of the Black Lives Matter movement, all these things that really Jesus would have been right there in front of the Black Lives Matter marches, and probably was black anyway. He wasn't white, was he? With a, and yet they hate Black Lives Matter because it's rattling their feeling of having power and privilege. They've become so used to it. And so this is why it all becomes separated, that when we go into something, we're going into the power and privilege and into the center of that. But if we're going into an institution, a religious institution that's been ingrained for 2,000 years, but slowly we can come back to ourselves. This is what I've found. And then we can get braver at saying things in a different way, or thinking in a different way, or calling God something different, or nothing happens. A bolt of lightning doesn't hit you. Do you know what I mean? I remember going into a church. I remember going into a church years ago in Dorset, and they had the most beautiful altar, and behind the altar there was a painting. It was a long painting. I'm holding my arms out, but you can't see my arms. Look, it was long. So
it was this big.
It was beautiful. It was a picture of the marshes there, and it was the moon rising over the marshes, and it was so beautiful. And it was a picture of Mary. It was how somebody envisaged Mary, and it was in this church. And where it was, the moon was right in the middle of the back of the altar, and of course the cross was right in the middle of it, like over the top of it. And at the time, I wasn't going to church or anything, and I thought, I'm going to move that cross, not because I objected to the cross as such, but because I thought that painting's so beautiful, and the cross is right on the middle of it. It's not good. So I moved the cross to the side, which actually looked better aesthetically. It was much nicer. But I did feel like I would be struck by lightning. I thought, oh, I'm going to get in terrible trouble now. I've moved the cross. And do you know what? I didn't. And I have gone on to drink many cups of tea, and I've even gone in churches, and nobody's pointed at me and said, you're the one who moved the cross in Dorset. It's fine.
No thunderbolts have struck you, and
Nothing
you know, the
happened.
church didn't fall down around you, and you were, you know,
No.
dragged away by 1,000 devils.
It was all good. Nothing happened.
You rebel. That's the very least of it, isn't it?
I'm an absolute wild woman. You wouldn't believe it.
I would believe it, actually. So with the church as well, it's interesting that lots of the saints sort of have a crossover too, don't they, with figures. I know you were talking about, is it Saint Kevin? And how do you say that in Irish? Because I know you were getting your tongue around that.
Well, in Old Irish, it's Cumjan, apparently, and then in newer Irish, it's Cuivine. So it's like you stress the last. I'm trying with the saints not to use the anglicised names, because to me that is colonialism, and it's where English people have gone all over the world and forced people to use their language, which is why we're so lazy with language, isn't it? Because everyone speaks English. I'm just trying to get my tongue round the older names, just as an exercise in thoughtfulness, really, about colonialism and imperialism and all those things. So power and privilege, yeah. So I'm trying to say Saint Cuivine, but it's not easy.
Beautiful name as well, isn't it?
Cuivine. Beautiful.
I have to say, I was really surprised. I had a cousin called Kevin, and we were looking up names one day, and it was Irish, and I thought, well, that doesn't sound very Irish, or very Irish names are usually more magical and more
sing-songy.
Yeah, and I was like, really? But that, when you said that makes sense. So I know, because obviously, like Bridget as well as is another one that is sort of, you know, is really a well-known pagan goddess, but also, you know, a huge part of. Oh, just not my.
Oh, you've got all jiggly.
I'm jiggling around. I knocked my laptop, and it was.
Jiggly fruit.
Yeah. Jen, what have you been up to? But the you know, obviously that's and also a really well-known Christian saint. So what have you found about marrying those up, or the thoughts on both of those? I know that's something you've been talking about.
Well, what happened with me and the saints, because I've never been into the saints particularly. I just thought, oh, they're all pious and good, and I'm not pious and good, so what have they got to do with me? You know, I'm not into them. And then one day, it was when I'm hoping I didn't talk about this last time, but somebody asked me to help them sprinkle their wife's ashes, and because I sometimes am a funeral celebrant in a sort of earth-centered way. A couple of weeks ago, I was helping with something, and it was a vigil that different religions were coming in. I'm going off on a tangent slightly now, but it was a thing where different religions were doing offerings as a vigil for the earth as part of Extinction Rebellion. This was online, and my friend Byron came on to do something, and I said, well, what shall I put you down as, to let people know every morning who's doing little sessions? So there would be Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and all sorts of people, and she said, put me down as earth religions. And I thought, oh, I'm an earth religions person, because I don't see that Christianity is not an earth religion. There's nothing more earth than following someone spirit that was embodied in a human body. I don't see that it's so earth. So anyway, but that's a tangent. Somebody asked me, I'd helped him do the funeral for his wife, and then she wanted to be thrown off the White Cliffs of Dover because she liked Monty Python. She was American and she liked Monty Python, and she thought that would be very Monty Python-esque to be thrown off the White Cliffs of Dover. But you cannot throw
her cremated ashes, not her body.
No, the ashes. But you can't even do that, because the White Cliffs of Dover are so patrolled by security, and there's fences. You can't get to the edge. There's no way of throwing anybody in a body or their ashes off the White Cliffs of Dover. So I managed to find a boat that goes out from Dover docks, and they do actually advertise themselves as being available for ashes scattering ceremonies, Very
Okay.
beautiful. It's like a dinghy sort of thing. It's lovely. Anyway, off we went out into the sea, and I had the strangest feeling while we were there that somebody or something was watching me from the water, and it was a very strange feeling. And I thought, something's there, you know, something's there. Anyway, we did the ceremony. It was beautiful, and we went home. And that night, I had a really strange dream about. I found a chestnut, you know, like a chestnut husk when they fall down, and then
Yeah.
inside is the conker, and it's that spiky sort of thing.
Yeah.
I had a dream about I found one of those, and I opened it up, and inside there was a little wooden block, and it like a dice, but it had different things carved on different sides. And on one side there was a man with antlers, a bit like the Gundestrup cauldron
Yeah.
shaman setting. And on the other side it was carved protected by St. Cuthbert. And I thought, that's weird.
Um,
And in the morning, I thought, oh, I better look St. Cuthbert up, because I'd never heard of St. Cuthbert. I mean, maybe I'd soaked it into my brain somewhere,
yes.
but who knows? Anyway, that was my dream. It was very weird. I don't normally have dreams like that, so I have to take notice
Wow.
of them. And I looked up St. Cuthbert, and one of the things about St. Cuthbert, he lived on the Farne Islands,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a hermit. And one of the stories about him was that he liked to pray in the North Sea, which is very cold, and he would stand in it up to his chest all night long, you know, praying. And he would get absolutely frozen through. And in the morning, when he came out of the water, otters would come and warm his feet with their bodies. And I thought, what an amazing story that is. What a
Wow.
beautiful thing. And I thought, oh, this is lovely. I love St. Cuthbert. And then a little while later, I sometimes do a thing called Novena for the Fallen Through. And the
Mm-hmm.
novena is 9 days of prayer. And the fallen through thing, the first thing we did was about people who had died through the government's austerity policies.
Yeah.
So it's people who've fallen through the cracks in society where we think there's a net, but there isn't, you know. So we did this 9 days of prayer. And then I started doing them every month on the full moon. And the first one we did was with St. Cuthbert, and it was about wildlife, because he was said to have been one of the first environmentalists, because he loved eider ducks particularly. And
That's
he
right. Yeah.
and he made rules about people not being able to touch the nests of nesting birds on the islands where he lived, because he was also a bishop on Lindisfarne, so he had
Yeah.
some power.
That's right. Because I went
So
there, didn't I?
that's right. So
Yeah.
he protected eider ducks and other seabirds. So I thought, oh, he's wonderful. So we did prayers to wildlife and what's happening to wildlife through him. By the end of the novena, he had antlers on his head. He had a cormorant on his shoulder. He had otters round his feet. And we were all saying, like pagans and Christians alike, saying, we love St. Cuthbert. St. Cuthbert is the best thing ever. We love St. Cuthbert, who's also known as Cuddy. That's his nickname, which is, you know, apparently that's the nickname for people who are called Cuthberts up in Northumberland, where he was from. We love Cuddy. He's wonderful. So I started looking to other saints who were from the 5th and 6th centuries, and their stories are so wild. They're just absolutely wild. I cannot. So we've worked with St. Madonak, who is an Irish saint who went to
Yes.
Wales and looked after the bees in the monastery there.
Yes.
And when he set sail to go back to Ireland, the bees kept following him, and he kept going back again to Wales. And then they'd follow him back to Wales, and he'd go again. Every time he left, the monastery bees would follow him. And so that's the story of how bees got to Ireland, which is not, I'm sure it's not true in the sense of, you know, but it's a spiritual story, isn't it? About how we connect to the wild and how the wild can follow us. And when I think of St. Madonak now, I'll show you this book, which is a very good book. This is a very good book, everyone. Singing with Blackbirds by Stuart A. Harris Logan. The survival of primal Celtic shamanism in later folk traditions. There's a lot in here about medieval saints and how a lot of their practices were about, what's the word? Sensory deprivation. Like, you know, when there's rebirthing rituals where people are buried in the ground, and things where we sit in the dark in order to connect to spirit and all those things.
Yeah.
That a lot of their stories, when you read them with those eyes, are about that. When St. Cuthbert was standing in the freezing water, it was about connecting to spirit from out of a human body. You know, it was to do with sensory deprivation, not about, we're always told it as though it's about penance, you know, that the saints thought, oh, we're sinners and we have to battle with our sin. But we could also think of it as being a shamanistic practice.
I was
And
just
that's the
thinking that,
thing.
yeah, there's got to be a mirroring of being in touch, like with St. Cuthbert standing in the water. There's got to be like an almost out of body thing, that his prayers, so it could be for prayers, but it's also, like you say, the shamanic, the practice of being outside of yourself and seeing things more clearly and focusing on things. And I'm just wondering, as you're saying that, you know, like you, I thought all saints were pious and good people, and a lot of them are just normal people doing extraordinary things, aren't they? Or taking things to the ends of the, you know, rather than people that go and live on a little island. I mean, like the little hermit island of St. Cuthbert's is a tiny little island off the edge of Lindisfarne.
Yes.
And, you know, that's where I said to you, I sang to the seals there because I was really wanting to see a seal and there were no seals. But, you know, and I was conscious of the water coming in. And of course, there's a danger in that liminal spaces, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Liminal spaces and liminal parts of our personality and our psyche, that's no different to now going on a journey, like we said earlier, to find yourself, going camping in the woods or going and staying on Dartmoor in a tent for a week to discover your wild inner woman or something. It's the same.
It's the same thing, isn't it? That they're
It's not about penance now, is it? It's
no.
about exploration.
Well, again, this is power and privilege, isn't it? Saying things are about sin and penance. Sin makes us individuals and makes us think about ourselves. It makes us self-obsessed because we're always trying to weed that out of ourselves. But sin is a collective thing. To me, sin is what divides us from spirit. And it's a collective thing that humanity does together when we forget that we are also spiritual beings. And sin is a word that we have a reaction to, but we can just think of it as separation. To me, it's just separation. But saying, oh, we're all sinners and we need to spend all our time thinking about how we get angry or how we have lustful thoughts or how we eat too much cake, that's just a way of making us not powerful people in the world. And not, and not standing up against the power that's trying to kill the earth and trying to, you know, make refugees have no home, or trying to keep money in the hands of the few, or all those things. That's what that is.
Definitely.
And I resist that with every breath in my body. And I don't care how we do it, whether we do it through Christianity or paganism or Buddhism or humanism or whatever, or nothing. I don't care. Who cares? As long as we're doing it, you know. This is the work, isn't it? To bring spirit back in, because spirit gives us strength to resist all those things that would kill life, really, you know. And that's the thing. So the saints are wonderful. Saint Madonak now, when I imagine him, he's got bees all around his head as a way of sensory deprivation, as a sort of mask. You know, in Tibetan shamanism, they have a kind of mask over their eyes that's got a fringe. I think of Saint Madonak now like that, with bees. It's just how he appears to me in my mind, that the bees are like his sensory deprivation, keeping him in the. And this is what we
once
find.
You're not looking, you have to look inside, and you have to look to your heart, don't you? If you can't physically, you know, you have to imagine imagine or retune to something.
Yes, to the darkness, or to. And I didn't deliberately think, oh, Saint Madomnak's got bees all around his head, you know, but that's just
like
how
that.
he. And in my group, we talk about, have the saints got antlers or not? And this is the thing, has this saint got antlers? Not all the saints have got antlers. Some of them, the story is about, oh, they were royal and they were good, and then they gave to the poor. You know, it's all the same thing, really. But some of them are so wild that they have definitely got antlers. And like, there's a saint called St. Kenneth, who's called Kenneth in English, but his name isn't spelt like that. He's Welsh. It's spelled Cenydd, St. Kenneth.
Oh, yeah.
And his story is that he was disabled when he was born and rejected by his parents. And he was put into a basket in the sea and just left to die, really. And that he was rescued by gulls who picked up the basket and took him to their cliff. And they plucked the breast feathers from their own bodies to keep him warm. And that they begged the elements to stop the storm to protect him. And this is a whole story about connection to the wild. There are so many saints like this from medieval times. Their stories just amazing. And yet at the same time, we find stories in them that are so human, you know, that they were so fragile in their humanity and that they weren't good or perfect. It's just that they opened themselves to spirit and the wild came to meet them. And that's my question really of myself. Can I open up to spirit in a way that the wild and the land will come to meet me? And it doesn't really matter what path we're following.
That's a wonderful way of looking at it, isn't it? That, you know, it's because some of these saints would have been, if they, like you say, if they were rich, you know, they're almost like celebrities, so they became a saint because they did all these wonderful deeds. But the people that did them because they were just following the spirit and opening themselves up to, you know, to the elements and to truth and to kindness and love, and that's why they become saints.
And these are where the stories of animals coming to them come in. There's so many stories of animals connecting to the saints and how they live their lives and their lessons of spirit through nature. You know, there are saints whose first disciples, it said, were badgers and foxes and squirrels.
Awesome.
You know, it's just the most amazing thing. And in Christianity, there's an idea that all of creation is praising God. It's not just us. You know, as Jesus says at one point, if my followers weren't speaking, the stones would speak.
Yes,
you know,
this
is animism. It's not this sort of narrow idea we're given of what religion is. And to me, it's amazing. But I was going to talk about Blood Iweth a little tiny bit, because I know that last week Tina, was talking about goddesses, and that you saw a goddess of owls.
Yes.
And you've been talking about Blood Iweth, who
owls
in her story was made out of flowers to be a wife of someone, and then she became an owl as a punishment, which isn't a punishment, of course. It's just a wildness, you know, it's just transforming into a wilder spirit. I mean, she started out as flowers, didn't she? Which we think she was
made out of flowers for Lou to be the perfect wife, and then she fell in love with Gron, I don't know how you say it.
Gronu, I think.
Yeah, and then they tried to kill Lou, I believe, which might be the punishment, which is a bit naughty. But you know, then if she was made for to marry him, and that's
it can be, yes, the first time because Blood Iweth was one of my big goddesses when I was a pagan. And the first time I mentioned her to somebody said, oh, well, her story is about how fickle women are, and it's to warn us about, but that's not that to me, that's not true. You know, the church has written this story. These are from the Welsh myths, and the church, thank you, the church and the monks, for writing the stories down. Thank you, because otherwise we might have lost them altogether. But they wrote them in their own way for their own reasons. Do you know what I mean? So we can think of Blood Iweth's story like Lou and Gronu could be the seasons. So Blood Iweth is moving the seasons on from summer to winter. You know, who knows what it is? It can be all sorts of things. We can think of it so many different ways. But when I began going to church, of course, I kind of drifted away from Blood Iweth, because I just did. I was thinking about something else. But she keeps coming back to me all the time in all sorts of different ways. And I mentioned her once to my friend Imogen, who is an amazing artist and used to do amazing art installations out in nature. She was talking about one time when she was doing something with the festival Corpus Christi, which is a festival in June in the church, which is about celebrating the presence of Christ in the wafers and the wine. So it's about celebrating the body of Christ being on this planet. And Imogen said, oh, Blood Iweth is to do with Corpus Christi. We can journey with Blood Iweth in Corpus Christi, because she came from spirit into physical form. So we can think of her. So sometimes I've written poems about Blood Iweth when I've called her our hedgerow, what do I call her? Hawthorn Christa. Christa is the name for a female kind of energy of Christ, that
Yeah.
sometimes people have written books about Krista rather than Christ.
Yes.
And that she's our Hawthorne. I call her my Hawthorne heretic because she brings me back to to
Oh, I
Goddess.
love it. I love it. That's
And she's
amazing.
our Hawthorne hedgerow Krista. In our land, you know, she is the spirit that's come from spirit into matter through flowers, and then she was punished and made a scapegoat in the same way that Christ was, and then transformed into a different form in the same way that he did. You know, this is a story that we can find through all sorts of
Yeah.
mythologies.
All the I can never say the word analogies are there, aren't they? That
Analogies, yes.
you can do with it. You can see similarities and patterns and through all of it, can't you?
And it's important to find them in our land, because Christianity has not come from a land like this land. I'm noticing the time. I've got so many
I
things to say.
I know.
I
Well, you can
read
always come back in October, darling.
oh, I read in a magazine a long, long time ago. I read a thing about that our spirituality in this land is not the same as Christianity, because the religions from desert places, the sun shines brightly on them, and their mythology is all very clear. You know, it's searching for the golden fleece. You know what the golden fleece is, and it's looking for those things. And these are desert religions. They're very defined. The sun shines on them brightly. Our religion and our spiritual path comes out of a land of greenery that you can only just see through, and a land where mist rises up and obscures everything, and the things we follow are only glimpsed through that.
Yes,
And so we might talk about the Holy Grail, but we don't know what the Grail is. Sometimes
we
it's a
can't see
cup.
it.
Sometimes we don't know what it is. It's the green man that we just see through the leaves, and we don't really know who he is, you know. And so this is the Christianity or the religion that I seek to find in this land. It doesn't need to be
Yes,
so well defined.
the
And there must
spirituality of
be,
this land.
yeah, for something to have ground and to have roots, then there must be stories in this land that will fit in with it. So where Blodaiweth and Christ, to me, their stories there are analogies in that. That means
Definitely,
that we can find our roots here where we are rather than looking to somewhere else. And that matters.
definitely. Oh,
There you go.
fantastic. Thank you, my darling. Well, I'm gonna finish this now. And I'm going to finish that now, and then I'm hoping you'll come back in October, because we've had
Ooh.
such an amazing chat, and there's lots of comments and lots of people have been watching.
Oh, thank you.
Blood Eye with the Bring of Seasons, I love that. Yeah, there's lots of people, there's lots of comments, and there's lots of lovely
I've got
things
a
on
lot to
there.
say about Blodaiweth. I
Yeah.
forced her in at the end. I was so determined to say something about her. I've
That's
just forced her in
perfect,
at
because
the end.
she was with me this week. So we'll say goodbye to everybody. So bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you. Hopefully, Jaqueline will come back in October. Yeah, and we'll
Oh,
see
well,
you
if you want
soon.
me to. Yes. Bye bye,
Definitely.
everyone.
Bye.